We're gonna learn what it's like to have a medieval tavern experience. I think this would be very nice. We'll have some bard playing music. We'll have some stale bread. We'll have, there'll be like one bed in the room and it'll be like, whoa, who's gonna sleep on the bed? Very nice time.
If it was where you went to gamble, drink, and eat. Perhaps something like this bowl of beef pottage known as bucanada. So thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring this video as we visit a medieval tavern, this time on Tasting History.
So fun.
So if you ever find yourself in the late medieval period and you are in...
This will be good for an authentic D&D campaign. Yeah, exactly! The tavern experience, D&D style.
...need of food and drink, you better find yourself an inn, tavern, or alehouse. Now, all three of those are not exactly synonymous, and we'll talk about how they're different a little bit later. But in general, you should be able to go to any of them and get a drink and probably some food. Now,
Yum.
Depending on the quality of the establishment, you might just be getting some bread and cheese.
Look at all that cheese. You know what that reminds me of? The cheese bunkers.
But if it's a reputable tavern, you should be able to get a bowl of pottage or stew. Now, some of these places might have what today is called a hunter's pot or perpetual stew going. And this is the concept of always having a cauldron of stew or pottage going at all times. Basically, you would take a bowl from it and then replace the ingredients that you just took out, so it's always replenishing itself. Even today, there are places that still practice this. There's a place in Japan who has been serving the same broth since 1945.
Whoa!
And in Perpignan, France, they served the same stew from the 15th century all the way up until World War II.
What? Okay, I have questions. How does that not get, like, contaminated with bacteria if it's always going? That seems insane. It's always boiling. Oh, it's always boiling, so it always kills out the bacteria? Because, like, I always read that you have to be careful when you put, like, leftover dinner into the fridge, because, like, if you put warm leftovers in a container, like, it can grow bacteria if it's not cooled off properly. So, like, I assumed that would be the same thing as this. But if it's not cooling at all, if it's the same temperature, would it would just be hot enough to kill the bacteria? It's the whole Shibathesis thing. At what point does it stop being the original dish? Oh my god, that's crazy. That's insane. Cooling then heating is different from just hot to begin with. I know, but I just feel like that's anyways.
When they couldn't get the right ingredients. And in the Middle Ages, getting the right ingredients would also influence what your stew would be. You might just get a vegetable pottage, and someplace it would just...
Wait, potatoes came from America? And they didn't have potatoes in the Middle Ages? I thought potatoes was their main diet. Potatoes are Peru? That's why so many famines. Oh, I knew they had grains, but I thought like potato was like a main ingredient for their stews to... Huh. I don't really know much about the Middle Ages other than knights and kings and maidens.
Be beans and cabbages, but some places it might be like a fish stew or something with really quality
fish
meat
have
in.
legs?
One of the most common stews from this period, which I've found recipes for in pretty much every cooking manuscript from England and France from the Middle Ages, is called bucanada or bocanade. Take veal, kid, or hen, and boil them in fair water, or else in fresh broth, and smite them in pieces, and pick them clean. And then draw the same broth through a strainer, and cast thereto parsley, sage, hyssop, mace, cloves, and let it boil till the flesh be enough. Then set it from the fire, and thicken it up with raw yolks of egg, and cast thereto powdered ginger, verjuice, saffron, and salt.
Saffron?
And then serve it forth for a good meat.
Damn.
I just find it so interesting that while the
Expensive.
spellings have obviously changed, and they would have been pronounced quite differently back in the day, the words themselves, for the most part, are the same words that we would use today. Now, there are words like smite, which means to cut, but we don't usually use it in like
that
recipes.
fish,
It's
chat.
more of a biblical cutting, I guess. Though, maybe we should bring that back. In my next cookbook, I'm gonna get rid of the word cut and use to smite. Now, there are a few words in the original that we don't use at all in English today, like æren, which was a Middle English word for eggs. though
Oh.
eggs was also a Middle English word for eggs, and it is around the time of this recipe that we see one get picked over the other. In 1490, William Caxton translated Virgil's Aeneid into English, and he was frustrated with how the English language was changing at the time. He tells a story of a mercer or a cloth merchant named Sheffield, and he was from the north of England, and he finds himself in Kent, in the south of England. And he goes up to this woman and asks her for some eggs. And she says, "I don't know what you're saying, I don't speak French." Well, neither did he, because eggs is not a French word. But she didn't know the word eggs because she was from the south, and she said eieren. Well, someone nearby overheard the confusion and said, "Ask for eieren," and he got his eggs. But after telling this story, Caxton admits that he's also confused and finds consternation in these two different words meaning the same thing. And he writes, "Lo, what should a man in these days now write? Eggus or eieren?"
What can a man write to get a damn egg? Eggus or Aaron? I just want my damn eggs.
Certainly it is hard to please every man because of diversity and change of language. But the thing is, he picked one, and he picked eggs. And usually it wouldn't matter which one he picked in years before because he would write it down and a few people would read it, great. But he was using a printing press. So thousands and thousands of these were going out, and so eggs became the word to use. And he did that with a lot of different words. He was the one that chose which version we use even to this day. Anyway, I just thought that was interesting. On to the recipe.
Yeah.
So for this boucanade, what you'll need is 3 to 4
Boucanade.
pounds or about 1.5 kilograms of beef, goat, or chicken.
Oh my god, chat! I could make this. Medieval cooking stream? I have beef. My family has so much beef. I got so much beef because we have a ranch. Okay. I'm taking notes. Yes, Tim, this is a recipe. I know, but I just had the thought. Wouldn't it be fun to do a medieval cooking stream?
With the bones. I'm using beef.
Yeah,
Originally it
Tavern
actually
stream.
says veal, but I'm just using beef for this. Also, kid. In the recipe it says kid. That is goat. I'm always having people saying, it's children. No, it's not. It's goats.
A kid
small
is a
handful
goat,
of parsley, a few leaves of sage, a few sprigs of fresh hyssop, a half teaspoon of mace.
Okay, I don't have hyssop or mace. I've never even seen that in the store before. Might have to find a substitute.
An 1/8 teaspoon of cloves, 4 egg yolks, a half teaspoon of ginger, a half cup or 120 milliliters of verjuice. So what exactly is verjuice or verjuice? It was a medieval way of making juice from unripened grapes. And so
Oh.
it's not fermented or anything, but it does have this like vinegary kind of acidicness to it, but it's also sweet. So
Oh, like apple cider vinegar might be a good sub. Man, I just love subbing things and wrecking the recipe because the sub doesn't make sense. I do this all the time. Instead of running to the store, I'm like, I bet I could sub this with something else. And then it doesn't taste the same. And I'm like, good enough.
if you don't have it, maybe like half grape juice and half red wine vinegar might mimic
okay.
the flavor. Then a pinch of saffron threads ground up and it
Okay, we don't got money for saffron here, chat. We're not using saffron. Might have to find a cheaper recipe, but we could use paprika. It's kind of the same color. Saffron is so expensive. How did the medieval peasants have saffron? I guess that was before it became a delicacy.
a teaspoon of salt. So first, put your meat into a large pot and cover it with water or broth or a combination of the two, and then bring this to a boil and reduce
Oh,
to
peasants didn't get spices. This is like what a royal or noble would eat. Makes more sense. Yeah, I'm like, what peasants are cooking with saffron, huh?
a simmer. And make sure to skim off any scum or foam that forms on top.
Okay.
Simmer this for about an hour or until the meat easily comes away from the bone. And then take it off the heat, take the meat out, and go ahead and smite your meat.
Yummy.
Also, the knife that I'm using is
Meat.
this honkin' knife.
Whoa.
It's a knife.
It's a
which I'm now
knife.
calling my
Okay, you know what's so funny? How like anyone who holds a big knife just has the urge to say, "I got a knife." Like, it's like a universal thing where you got a knife and you're like, "I got a knife." It's a big knife.
smiting knife. This was made for me, handmade by one of my Patreon patrons.
Oh, cool.
And it mimics an older design from like the early Renaissance, I believe. I just think it's so cool. So I'll put a link to, because he makes like hand-done knives. I'll put a link to his
Okay,
stuff.
cool.
Anyway, this is now my smite.
Eastern peasants, who can make me a knife? Do we got any blacksmiths here? I know we got some blacksmiths here. Who can make me a knife? A knife. So
once your meat is smitten or smited, you'll want to strain the broth as much as you can until it's nice and clean. Then return the meat to the pot and add the broth back in. Add in the parsley, sage, and hyssop, all chopped very fine, as well as the mace and the cloves. Then stir everything together and bring it to a simmer. Then set the lid on the pot and let it simmer for an hour or an hour and a half or 2 hours, really until the meat is as tender as you want it to get. Also keep an eye on it.
I would rather put you in bubble wrap than send you a knife. That's very fair. That's very fair.
Because you might need to add some water in case it all steams away, but that's why you want to leave the lid on as you do it. Anyway, while it cooks, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what else you might find in a medieval tavern.
Time for history! Let's go!
Befell that in that season on a day in Southwark at the tabard as I lay, ready to wend in on my pilgrimage to Canterbury with full devout courage. That was from the prologue of the Canterbury Tales by Geoffrey Chaucer, and being written between 1387 and 1400, it contains one of the first references to a named inn, an actual historic inn. It was called the Tabard, and this is where, in the Canterbury Tales, all of the characters gather just before heading south to Canterbury on their pilgrimage, which is kind of the whole point of the work. Chaucer talks about the owner of this inn and says that he was a very good host. And to the supper he set us straight away. He served us with victuals of the best kind. Strong was the wine, and well pleased we were to drink. Now, when I picture this in my mind's eye, I'm definitely influenced by things like Lord of the Rings and Dungeons and Dragons and all of these kind of medieval fantasy worlds, but they aren't exactly like that.
Was that from World of Warcraft? That looks like a night elf.
Medieval fantasy.
Oh, it's just Dungeons and Dragons. That is a night elf right there.
Worlds, but they aren't exactly.
Yes, this is a WoW trailer. Clocked a million miles away.
Exactly like that. First of all, there are a lot fewer like orcs and elves, but also the inns and taverns and alehouses of medieval England, at least, were not all the same. They were quite different, at least at different parts in their history. Now, of course, throughout time, their definitions overlapped, and there was a lot of variety within each classification, but in general, you had the inns at the top of the echelon. They tended to be the nicest, and then there were the taverns, and then the alehouses at the bottom.
What about the brothels? Was that at the very bottom? Like, I know that, that was a thing then. Different building.
Inns, how they started out at least, they were a place for people to stay the night. Usually they were kind of near the gatehouse of a city or a town, or else in between cities or towns, like a day's walk away, maybe 20 miles away. So it was a place that you could stop the night and stay. And just like a bed and breakfast, they would often give you some food and drink. But only, just like a bed and breakfast, to the people who were actually staying there. You couldn't roll up, you weren't staying there, you roll up and you're like, I want some grub. That isn't how it happened. Though at times in history, inns found themselves making good money from the food and drink, and so they kind of said, all right, maybe we will just serve to anyone who comes up, and so it was like having a restaurant in a hotel, which is still a thing today.
Yeah.
A tavern, on the other hand, was kind of the opposite. It was a place for people to come eat and drink, mainly drink, but it was not typically a place to stay. Originally, taverns were places...
Oh, I actually did not know there was a distinction between that. That's very interesting. I didn't know taverns were mainly just like places to eat and drink. I kind of thought taverns had rooms. That's really interesting. Okay.
Places that served wine. They were run by vintners who made or imported wine. And remember, this is a time when wine was actually still being made in England. I think they do it again now, but they had quite a bit of wine being made in England, but it was mostly made by the church, and they kept it all for themselves for, I'm assuming, communion. So anyone else was having to get imported wine, which was a lot more expensive. The most common wine in England at the time was a red wine from Gascony that cost about 3 pennies a gallon. twice as much as the very best ale. Then there was Rhenish wine from the Rhine region, which cost 6 to 8 pennies a gallon.
Ooh,
now, if you're paying this
expensive.
much for your wine, you want to make sure that you're getting actually what you paid for. So if there's any question, you can ask the taverner to let you down into the cellar to see the actual barrel that your wine is coming from.
Fancy wine.
If a taverner was found to be selling adulterated or counterfeit wine, they would often be punished by being put in the pillory or the stocks and having that offending wine poured over their head. Public humiliation.
Then we can point and laugh. What a idiot.
But they would also usually get kicked out of the guild, which basically meant that they lost their business. There were actually people whose job it was to go around and inspect the wine, and it was more popular in France than in England, but these people were usually the town crier, and they would do this kind of as part of their job and be called the wine crier.
I would be a good wine crier. I'm good at yapping. I'm good at saying problematic things with my whole chest that are not true. And I'm good at drinking wine.
The 11th century, there
I
was
also
a
cry
French
when I
writer
drink
who
wine.
said, "Wine criers cry with open mouth the wine which is for
That's
sale in
town
the taverns at 4 farthings." Now, some of these taverns were selling the best wine, and some were selling the worst wine, and everything in between. There was a lot of variety. In London alone, in 1309, there were 354 different taverns. So lots of variety. And
wow,
with
that's
a
a lot of
population of
taverns.
only 80,000 people, that's like one tavern for every 225 people. So business was booming. It's probably why they started eventually selling other drinks commonly, like cider from apples and perry from pears, especially in the West Country.
Perry? Is that a thing that still exists? I've never had perry, but I love pears. Princess doing a job. Your princess peers would have a stroke. Oh, that's true. I'm a princess. I can't be seen doing that. Pear cider is a thing. Oh, that would be delicious.
And then mead, which is made from honey. Often that was more expensive and kind of kept for special occasions, but I'm sure you could find different versions all over. Also, I found a mead that I really like.
Oh, chat, have you ever had mead? It is strong. Like, it is strong. It's very sweet. Yeah. I don't really like it. It's really strong and like definitely a sipping. No, I don't think it burns. It's like, I would say it's like a sipping drink. Really sweet.
It's called Odin's Skull. It's not so sweet and kind of has a little
Oh.
spice to it. I'll put a link in the description. It's really, really good. If
Yummy.
you like mead. I should do another mead video because there are a lot of old mead recipes I need to cover.
We can make mead. Would that get me demonetized if I made alcohol on stream? Is that allowed? I'll have to check the rules, but that would be fun. Making mead?
More mead, maybe coming up. Anyway,
There's
these
no
taverns, along
distillation?
with all these different drinks that they were now selling, would often start to sell food, and some would even have a room or two to let up, like on the second or third floor of the building. So you can see that the lines between the definitions are already getting blurred. Also, these rooms, you didn't get like a room to yourself.
Draw me like one of your French girls.
They usually would house like 10 or 12 different people who didn't know each other. It was like mash as many people into these rooms as possible. If there was a bed, again, lots of people sleeping in the same bed, so it ain't the holiday
The whole
yet.
family.
Now, the least extravagant of the 3 places to get drinks, and there were more places you could get drinks that we're covering, were the ale houses. And when they started out, they were just that. It was a private house where the wife in the house was selling ale because she would make a big batch of ale, but ale back then, especially before hops, would only last a day, 2, maybe 3. And so anything that the family couldn't drink themselves, she would sell to everyone else. And so she would stick a stick or a broom outside of the door, and that was the signal letting everyone know that there was ale for sale.
Oh, cool.
Eventually, these places too would serve some food, though typically it wasn't the highest quality or as varied a menu. You'd probably get some bread and cheese, maybe a meat pie, who knows. Now, just because these ale houses were less official than taverns and inns, that doesn't mean that it was just a free-for-all. They were still controlled. They had to sell quality ale. In fact, in some ways, it was even more controlled because ale was such a staple of the people's diet. It was a major form of calories for many people. In 1266...
What? It was a form of calories for people? Was it Still alcoholic though? They're saying they drank ale to get their enough calories to live? Holy. Yes, but not as alcoholic as modern beers. So peasants were like drunk a lot of the time? Ale was safer than drinking water? Way lower alcohol content, but still alcoholic. Dang. These are probably about 3 to 5% alcoholic. That's still like quite alcoholic. I mean, I guess to like deal with the horrors of being a peasant in the medieval times, you'd have to be drunk a lot of the time. Drink scummy contaminated water or ale. Take the edge off life as a peasant.
The excise of bread and ale went into effect, and this tied the price of ale and of bread to the price of wheat. And just like there were the wine criers, there were ale conners who would go around to test the ale and make sure everything was on the up and up. They were sworn to examine and assay the beer and ale, and to take care that they were good and wholesome, and sold at proper prices according to the assize.
Good wholesome
and also
ale.
to present all defaults of brewers to the next court leet. A male baker or brewer who failed to adhere to these new laws ought to undergo the judgment of the pillory without any redemption of money. Likewise, the woman brewer shall be punished by the trumbrel, trebuchet, or castigatory if she offends divers times and will not amend.
Wait! Why did the woman get trebucheted? What? That seems a bit of an escalation from the pillory to a trebuchet. I don't think they mean that trebuchet. Okay. What the fuck? Wait, you just yeet the woman? Damn woman tampered with my ale. Send her to the trebuchet. Yeet her out of the kingdom. Holy.
That is to say, if an alewife flouts the law over and over and doesn't change her ways, then she's going to be punished. And the punishments are all forms of a public humiliation.
To the next kingdom you go. It has to be a different trebuchet. Yeah.
Though I had to kind of look into trebuchet because I think of a trebuchet and I'm like, were they flinging these poor women into like the walls of castles? So it turns out there are smaller versions of trebuchets that were used just for dunking people into the river, and that's what it was.
Oh, okay.
They weren't trebucheting women.
We had the
across
same
field.
idea.
Anyway,
Okay.
if you are visiting an ale house or a tavern or an inn, you'll want to take it easy. Don't go overboard on either the food or the drink, or else you might end up like poor Osbert of Elstow. The Bedfordshire Coroner's Roll of 1276 tells us what happened to poor Osbert after he left a tavern. About midnight on 17th May.
Look at this guy. He enjoys the spirits. Osbert does. That picture is a mood. That picture is a mood.
Osbert Lewile, son of William Christmas of Elstow, who was drunk and disgustingly overfed, came from Bedford toward his house. When he arrived at his house, he had the falling sickness, fell upon a stone on the right side of his head, breaking the whole of his head, and died by misadventure.
Oh my god, Osbert died? Holy, wow, he blacked out and died by hitting his head on a rock?
And while died by misadventure may sound cool, I assure you it is not. And it seems that leaving these taverns drunkenly was an ongoing problem and often ended in your demise. In another coroner's roll from 1272, it says that Ralph, son of Ralph, left a tavern and was accosted by 4 men. Robert Bernard of Wooton, Robert of Shefford, Richard Norman, and Roger Brienne. I love that every person in this story has a first name that starts with the letter R.
Yeah.
Even the tavern that Ralph was drinking at was owned by Robert Mallon. Anyway, these 4 men, Robert, Richard, and Roger, ask Ralph if he is drunk, and he is. And so he drunkenly says, "Who are you?" And in response, because he was drunk, Robert sprang forward and struck Ralph across the crown of his head with a spart axe.
What?
So that blood and brains immediately flowed out. He immediately lost his speech and died thereof about midday on the morrow. The thing is,
Why did he hit him with an axe just because he was drunk? Why does the drunk guy have an axe? That seems to escalate things like quite a bit, Robert. Damn.
These ruffians who accosted Ralph are the exact type of people who would often be in the taverns themselves. I mean, there were those upscale establishments, of course, but most, it seems, at least that got written about, were dens of scum and villainy that were filled with gambling, drinking, and prostitution. But even with such a terrible reputation, it seems that pretty much everybody found themselves in a tavern at one point or another, even the clergy. But that was quite frowned upon, as can be seen in this letter from around the year 1200.
The clergy?
An archdeacon to a rural dean. Greetings. We have been given to understand that chaplains in your deanery live in less than upright fashion, for they go to
What is this picture? Is this like the medieval beer bong? Like they like suspend you, put a funnel in your mouth and pour alcohol into your mouth. Ye old keg stand. That is so funny.
Taverns, as we have heard, where they have inappropriate and illicit association with lay people, with the result that those who say priests are no different from lay people are justified, in order that in the future it cannot be said that, as a result of your laziness, such chaplains have been found in your deanery. Bestir yourself to correct these matters. Another letter I found shows that whether you're a layperson or a clergyman, going and gambling at these taverns often led to ruin. In this letter, a man has lent the friend of a friend some money. And now he is asking the friend to pay him that money back. And the friend is like, no. I do not wish to lend him anything of mine, for he is an inveterate dice player, and he loses everything that he gambles. Those who were with him in the tavern when he lost X and his pledges, they gained everything, right down to his drawers. So take care that you refrain from handing over any more of your own money, which you borrowed from me, and so lose on him what you ought to repay me. So should you find yourself in medieval England, maybe stay away from any taverns or inns that seem a little dodgy. I'm hoping that I have found an upstanding inn in the Porch House in Stow-on-the-Wold, which I just booked several nights at when I'm going to England in June. Very, very excited. Now, they actually claim to be the oldest inn in England, dating from the year 947, though there are numerous places that make very similar claims, so it's hard to tell exactly what they mean. There's a wonderful video by one of my favorite creators, Jay Draper. I'll put her stuff in the description. She's great. And she talks about how a lot of places are England's oldest pub or England's oldest inn. And it often has to do with, like, there is one stone that was here in 1450 and the rest of the place is new.
That is something that I really would like to see in Europe, because Canada is such a young country. We don't really have stuff like, we don't really have old buildings. So I would like to go to Europe and see old buildings. I like the architecture. Everything here is just like bungalows, like new buildings. I think that's crazy to be in a building from like 15th century or 16th century, you know? Eastern European villages are fun to see. There's buildings in my town that have been around for about 1,000 years. That's just so cool to me. I have not experienced that. Here, it's like, this was probably made in the 50s or 60s. There are buildings from Roman times. That's just so cool. That's just so mind-boggling to me, that things are so old. You gotta visit Europe at some point. I would love to visit Europe at some point. I need to see these things firsthand one day, maybe. That's just amazing.
It's like, you know, the pub of Theseus. But sometimes also it's like,
I would love
yes,
to see Egypt.
In 900 there was definitely an inn here, and there's an inn here now, but, you know, here it was like a dentist's office, and here was a bank, and, you know. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I'm still really, really excited to go. And perhaps, if I can convince them to really lean into their medieval pedigree and make some bocanade, like the one that I'm about to eat. So as soon as the meat is nice and tender, take it off the heat, and then it is time to add the egg yolk.
There's a city and a few other places here in the Netherlands that have stuff going back to Rome and early medieval times. Oh, that's so cool. I would love to see it. Architecture is just not the same anymore. I like seeing all the cathedrals and things too. It's insane to me that like normal, I guess not, yeah, normal people made those. Here it's like, let's just put some drywall up and good to go. I miss McDonald's play place. Screw the gray buildings. Yeah, that's Canada. We need to bring back dome architecture. We need to bring back like beauty and art and architecture. I mean, I guess they do have that modern architecture, but I don't really like modern style architecture. Capitalism took the fun out of everything because wood and drywall is fast and cheap. Yeah. It makes sense. I just miss out on seeing old. I haven't seen much of that before.
Now, if you just add the egg yolks right now, they're gonna scramble and it's gonna be unpleasant. So what you need to do is let the broth cool down just a little bit and then take a little of that broth and slowly add it into the egg yolks as you're whisking.
Okay.
And they will start to warm up. Keep doing this until you've added about a half cup of the broth.
Isn't this like how you make hollandaise,
and then whisk in
kind
the
of?
ginger and the saffron and the salt, and then you can add that to the stew. Finally, add in the verjus, and it is ready to go.
That looks
and here we
actually
are,
good.
a bocanada fit for a medieval tavern. So you want to add those egg yolks in like last thing before you serve it, because if you ever have to reheat it, they do tend to scramble a little bit. So they go from thickening it to scrambled. The taste is going to be the same, but the look is a little different. And I did just have to reheat mine, unfortunately. Doesn't matter. Here we go. The thing is, smells wonderful. The saffron is what hits me. I was worried it was going to be the clove because that's what was hitting me at the beginning. But now it's the saffron. Here we go.
I bet that's actually good. Like simmering meat that long?
That's really good. That is so interesting because you get those medieval flavors that you would never find in a modern beef stew. Like the saffron, like the cloves, like the mace, like verjus, which adds this kind of biting acidity without being super acidic, because a lot of medieval dishes will actually just add vinegar, and that is the flavor that you get. This is different. There's more of a sweetness to it. Really, really nice, and the meat just falls apart. Anyway, if you do want to make this, or if I can get that in England to make it, then I will point you toward the Tasting History website, Tasting History.
I wonder what mace tastes like. Does anyone know? I've never heard about it. Medieval stew with meat, spices, and verjus. I noticed there's no vegetables. It's just meat and broth.
Get 10%
Medieval
off
cheesecake?
of your first purchase of a website or domain. And I will see you next time.
Medieval cheesecake? I love cheesecake. They had medieval cheesecake? Like, is that an actual recipe for medieval cheesecake, or is he like adapting it? I gotta know. I gotta eat that.
On Tasting History.
Romans had cheesecake too? What? He had a Roman cheesecake video too? Why would they not have cheesecake? I don't know. That just seems like a modern dessert. I guess it's probably quite different though.